Okay, so we all live under laws, right? But have you ever stopped to think, what is a law? What actually gives it power over us? It might sound obvious, but this is one of the biggest, most intense debates in the entire philosophy of law.
I mean, really think about it. If a government passes a law that is just profoundly immoral, say a law that requires discrimination, are you still supposed to follow it? Is it even a valid law to begin with? This one single question has kicked off a philosophical battle that's been raging for centuries.
And in this battle, you've got two main contenders. In one corner, we have Team Natural Law. They argue that for a law to be a real law, it absolutely has to be moral. In the other corner, you have Team Legal Positivism. They say, nope, morality doesn't enter the picture. As long as the law was made through the right process, it's a law, period.
All right, so let's start with Team Natural Law. Their entire philosophy boils down to this one core idea. There is an unbreakable, fundamental link between the laws we humans write down and some kind of higher, universal moral code.
The big idea here is that justice isn't something we just invent out of thin air. It's something we discover. Natural law thinkers believe that certain moral truths are kind of baked into the very fabric of the universe, and we can figure them out using our reason. And our human laws, well, they're only legitimate if they actually reflect those universal truths.
And this famous quote from the philosopher Thomas Aquinas, this is the ultimate rallying cry for Team Natural Law. What he's saying is, if a rule is fundamentally unjust, it's not just a bad law, it's a fake, it's a fraud, it's a corruption of what law is even supposed to be, and it has no real power to command our obedience.
And trust me, this is not a new idea. It goes way, way back. We're talking ancient Greece, where the Stoics saw law as part of the rational order of the cosmos. Then it got tied to God's will by theologians like Aquinas. Later on, Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke used it to build the case for inalienable natural rights, the foundation of modern democracy. And then in the 20th century, after the world witnessed the horrors of totalitarianism, this way of thinking came roaring back.
But of course, not everyone was on board with this. In the 19th century, a powerful new way of thinking emerged to challenge that ancient link between law and morality. So let's meet the other team, legal positivism.
For positivists, the whole thing is much simpler. Law is a human creation. It's a set of rules made by people for people. They champion what's called the separability thesis, which is just a fancy way of saying there is no necessary connection between law and morality. A law is valid because of its source, where it came from, not because of its moral goodness.
Early on, a guy named John Austin defined law as basically a command from a king or a government backed up by a threat. Later, philosophers like H.L.A. Hart came up with more sophisticated ideas, like the rule of recognition, which is essentially the shared agreement among officials about what counts as a law. But the common thread through all of it is that law is a system of rules created by social facts, not by some abstract moral principles.
So for a positivist, the question isn't, is this law just? It's, was this law made correctly? Was it passed by the proper legislature? Did it follow all the required procedures? If the answer is yes, then it's a valid law, whether you or I happen to think it's a good one or not.
Now, this isn't just a stuffy debate for philosophy lectures. This clash of ideas has massive, real-world consequences in our courtrooms, in our governments, and right out on our streets. Let's just imagine for a second that you're a judge. A case comes before you, and the law is a little ambiguous. Or maybe, applying the law exactly as written will lead to a result that seems deeply unfair. What do you do? Well, your answer probably depends on which of these philosophies you lean toward.
A natural law approach might lead you to be a more activist judge. You'd see your role as making sure the law achieves a just outcome, even if you have to get creative with your interpretation. The positivist approach, on the other hand, makes you more of an umpire. Your job is just to call balls and strikes based on the rules as they're written, and leave judging the morality of the law to the people who wrote it. And what about for us, as citizens? What happens when we're faced with a law that we believe is fundamentally wrong? I mean, think about the great protest movements throughout history, from the civil rights movement to anti-apartheid struggles. This is where this debate really gets intense.
Natural law gives a pretty clear justification for civil disobedience. If an unjust law isn't a real law, then you have a right, maybe even a duty, to stand up against it. For positivism, it's more complicated. They'd say the law is still legally valid, so when you break it, you're accepting the legal consequences. Your reason for disobeying is a moral one, which is totally separate from the law itself.
So, after all these centuries of debate, which team won? Where do our modern legal systems actually land on this? Well, it turns out the answer is that they've learned to borrow a little something from both sides.
What we have today is something of an uneasy truce. We rely on positivism for the day-to-day nuts and bolts. We need clear, predictable rules so that society can function in a stable way. But we rely on natural law for our conscience. Our constitutions, our bills of rights, our declarations of human dignity, those are all deeply rooted in natural law ideas. A system with only positivist rules could justify any atrocity. But a system with only natural law could lead to total chaos, with everyone just following their own moral code.
So the crucial point is this. The best systems find a balance. They build a stable framework of rules, but they make sure that framework is always pointing toward justice and protecting fundamental rights. That tension between these two big ideas isn't a weakness. It's actually the very thing that keeps our legal systems both stable and striving to be just.
And that brings us right back to where we started. This isn't some settled, ancient debate. Every generation has to face this question all over again, in new and different ways. So I'll leave you with this to think about. When the letter of the law and the spirit of justice point in opposite directions, which path do you choose?